Summer sun, a relentless tyrant in the California sky, beat down on Eleanor Vance's meticulously manicured backyard. It was a domestic oasis, dominated by a kidney-shaped, azure pool that shimmered like a misplaced fragment of the Caribbean. But Eleanor's true pride, the undisputed sovereigns of this watery kingdom, were not her children, for they were grown and gone, but her two Pekin ducks, Lancelot and Guinevere. Lancelot was the elder, a massive, snow-white creature with an ego disproportionately large for his webbed feet. Guinevere, smaller and perpetually nervous, was nonetheless fiercely loyal to her mate. They were not pets in the traditional sense, they were wardens. They'd been raised on the property, and the pool, surrounded by thick, vibrant hedges and a sturdy wrought iron fence, was their territory, their ancestral feeding ground. Any deviation from the established routine, Eleanor's morning feed, the midday swim, the afternoon nap in the shade of the weeping willow, was met with suspicion and, often, a surprisingly vicious territorial display. The source of the current, profound disruption was Maya Chin. Maya was Eleanor's new neighbor, having moved into the slightly less grand but equally well-kept house next door just 3 weeks prior. She had two small, energetic children, 8-year-old Finn, a skinny, wide-eyed boy whose energy seemed to vibrate off his skin, and 4-year-old Lily, a round-cheeked girl who hadn't mastered the art of swimming beyond a cautious paddle on the top step. The invitation had been extended a week ago, a gesture of neighborly goodwill that Eleanor now regretted with a cold knot in her stomach. Maya, catching Eleanor clipping hydrangeas by the fence, had sighed dramatically. "Your pool, it looks like a mirage in this heat. Ours is out of commission, a plumbing nightmare. I swear, Finn is going to spontaneously combust if he doesn't get into the water soon." Eleanor, a woman who valued peace and quiet above all, hesitated. She loved Maya's children, in the abstract way one appreciates cute things from a safe distance. "Well, I suppose, for an hour or so. Just once, mind you. Lancelot and Guinevere are a bit possessive. They tolerate me," she'd said, a touch of pride in her voice, "but they view all others as temporary, noisy disruptions." Maya, however, had seemed to only hear the word yes. "Oh, thank you, Eleanor. You're a lifesaver. We'll be quiet as mice, I promise. We'll even bring a 6-pack for you." The appointment was set for 11 a.m. on a Friday. Eleanor had strategically scheduled the ducks' morning swim and feeding for 9 a.m., hoping to satiate their aquatic and caloric desires before the guests arrived. It failed spectacularly. As the clock struck 11, Eleanor watched from the kitchen window, sipping her iced tea. Maya arrived with the kind of bustling energy that felt like a localized windstorm. She had a bag slung over her shoulder, 2 neon-colored pool noodles, and a sun hat that kept sliding off her head. Finn and Lily, clad in bright, water-soaked swimwear, burst through the gate like uncorked champagne, screaming with the pure joy of imminent water. The ducks, who had been dozing placidly by the skimmer, were instantly on high alert. Lancelot's head snapped up. His black, beady eyes fixed on Finn, who was already halfway to the edge, dropping his flip-flops and preparing for a cannonball. A low, vibrating gurrak rumbled in Lancelot's throat, a sound Eleanor knew meant serious trouble. "Easy, Lancelot, easy, boy," Eleanor muttered to herself, but the ducks weren't boys, they were creatures of instinct, and their instincts were shouting, "Intruders." Maya, oblivious, was wrestling sunblock onto Lily's shoulder. "Okay, sweetie, you stick to the steps. Finn, no splashing for the first minute, okay? Mommy needs a second to decompress." Finn ignored her. He was already standing on the ledge, silhouetted against the bright sun, his arms raised. "Look, Mom, watch this." He executed a jump that was less cannonball and more belly flop, sending a colossal sheet of water over the pool edge and, critically, directly onto Lancelot. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Lancelot launched himself, a feathered, enraged missile, directly at the point where Finn had disappeared into the water. The guttural sound he made was no longer a warning, but a declaration of war, a sound closer to a velociraptor's shriek than a farm animal's honk. "Oh, dear God," Eleanor breathed, dropping her glass. Guinevere, following her mate's lead, began a high-pitched, panicked yik that echoed the rising terror in Lily's tiny eyes. Finn surfaced, sputtering and laughing, only to find a 6-pound, furious white bird bearing down on him. Lancelot didn't bite. Eleanor had learned he preferred to use the hard, shovel-like edge of his beak to ram. He hit Finn square in the chest with the force of a small, feathered battering ram. Finn's laughter instantly turned into a choked sob of pain and confusion. He thrashed, trying to push the attacking duck away. "Lancelot! Stop it!" Eleanor shouted, already halfway out the back door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Maya finally looked up from applying sunblock to realize the sound was not playful splashing, but genuine distress. She saw the massive duck clinging to her son's swimsuit, flapping its enormous wings in a frenzy of territorial rage. "Get away from him!" Maya screamed, vaulting up. She grabbed the nearest pool noodle, a bright green foam tube, and, driven by pure maternal adrenaline, swung it wildly at the duck. The blow didn't connect with Lancelot, who expertly ducked, but it hit the water with a loud thwack, scattering both ducks and children. Finn scrambled backward onto the pool steps, clutching his chest, tears streaming down his face. Lily, witnessing the violence, let out the ear-splitting shriek that had cut short the hook. Maya, breathing heavily, stood between the children and the pool, holding the pool noodle like a weapon. "Are you all right, sweetie? Finn, are you hurt?" Lancelot and Guinevere, bobbing defensively in the center of the pool, regarded the humans with unblinking, furious eyes. They had established their dominance. The pool was theirs, and the intruders were retreating. Eleanor, arriving at the scene, was speechless. The silence, save for Finn's ragged sobs, was absolute. The sight of her neighbor brandishing a pool toy like a broadsword at her beloved duck, and her beloved duck having clearly assaulted a child, was a tableau of utter domestic chaos. Maya's face, pale beneath the sun hat, turned on Eleanor, no longer the friendly neighbor, but an enraged mother. "What are those things? You said they were possessive. They just attacked my son." Eleanor swallowed, her composure crumbling. I warned you, Maya. They are very territorial. I told you, they see others as disturbances. A disturbance doesn't leave bruises." Maya hissed, pulling back the fabric of Finn's swimsuit. A large, ugly red welt was blooming on his pale skin. "This isn't just a quirk, Eleanor. This is aggression. They are a danger to my children." Lancelot, apparently sensing the shift in power dynamics, let out a triumphant, echoing quack. As if demanding confirmation of his justice. Beat of justice, Maya, refusing to back down, stepped right up to the edge of the pool, her voice dangerously low. "Fine. If that's how we're going to play this, Eleanor. You keep your guard dogs on a leash. Because if those birds so much as look sideways at my kids again, I will call the city. I will call animal control. And I will make sure this little watery kingdom of yours is officially condemned." The bruised encounter at the pool was not an isolated incident, it was the declaration of war. The incident with Finn had irrevocably shattered the delicate veneer of neighborly civility, replacing it with a cold, escalating tension that vibrated through the dividing hedges. Eleanor, a woman who had always prided herself on her good standing in the community, felt a burning injustice. She saw Maya's accusation as a gross overreaction. Lancelot was merely defending his home, his flock, his dignity. Maya's hysterical swinging of the noodle, in Eleanor's view, was the true catalyst for the drama. She refused to apologize, instead opting for a stiff, defensive response the following morning when Maya cornered her at the shared mailbox. "I understand your concern, Maya," Eleanor said, holding her chin high, clutching a stack of junk mail. "But I explicitly warned you about Lancelot's nature. He is a territorial bird. If the children had entered the pool gently, perhaps." "Gently?" Maya cut her off, her voice laced with incredulity. They're children, Eleanor. They splash. They play. You are literally blaming my 8-year-old for being assaulted by your poultry. That welt on his chest didn't come from territorial nature, it came from an attack. And your threat to call the city was hardly neighborly, Eleanor retorted, her hands tightening. Neither is having my child rammed by a feral swan wannabe. I am putting you on notice, control your birds, or I will involve the authorities, Maya finished, turning her back sharply and walking toward her house. Eleanor stood there, feeling the heat rise in her face. The confrontation had confirmed her suspicion, Maya Chen was an antagonist. The war began with small, passive-aggressive skirmishes. First, the fence line. Eleanor noticed a distinct absence of her usual morning newspaper. It was now being placed in a ridiculously precise spot right up against Maya's side of the fence, forcing Eleanor to lean uncomfortably over the hedges to retrieve it. Then, the noise. Maya began running her ancient, loud lawnmower every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, a full hour before Eleanor's accustomed time for quiet reflection with her coffee. Eleanor retaliated subtly. She bought a new, high-powered outdoor spotlight and strategically aimed it to shine just over the tallest hedge, directly into Maya's primary bedroom window. She also started her own new routine, playing extremely loud, classical operatic music, specifically the most shrill, intense pieces by Wagner, on her pool deck speakers for a full hour every afternoon. The ducks, meanwhile, were flourishing in the escalating tension. Lancelot, emboldened by his victory over Finn, seemed to have taken his role as the property's alpha enforcer to a new extreme. He would stand sentinel at the pool's edge, honking fiercely at anything that dared move beyond the fence, a passing dog, the mailman, even the harmless, elderly couple who lived across the street. The conflict reached its first true peak 2 weeks later, over the ball. Finn and Lily were playing a vigorous game of catch in their own yard. They had a large, inflatable beach ball, bright yellow and red, that was clearly one of their favorites. The game was going well until Finn threw the ball too high, and a gust of wind carried it not only over the fence but directly into the center of Eleanor's pool. It floated there, an alien, brightly colored invasion on the pristine water. Lancelot and Guinevere immediately investigated. They paddled up to it, their heads cocked. Lancelot, after a careful circle, decided the ball was an active threat. He began pecking at it viciously, his powerful beak tearing small nicks in the plastic. Finn immediately ran to the fence. "Hey! That's my ball. Give it back." Eleanor, watching from the patio, made no move to help. Let him learn, she thought grimly. Consequences. Eleanor. Tell your duck to stop. Finn pleaded, his eyes wide. Finn, Eleanor called out coolly, that ball is on my property, and it has clearly startled my birds. If you'd kept it in your own yard. Maya rushed out, alerted by Finn's rising hysteria. She took one look at Lancelot systematically destroying the beach ball, and the blood rushed from her face. That ball had been a gift from their late grandfather. That's enough. Maya shouted, pushing open the gate that led from her side yard to Eleanor's driveway. She marched onto Eleanor's property, her expression thunderous. Eleanor met her halfway on the lawn. You are trespassing, Maya. I am retrieving my property. Maya's eyes were blazing. And stopping your animal from destroying it. She strode toward the pool, intent on plucking the rapidly deflating ball from the water. This was the ultimate transgression. Entering the territory. Invading the inner sanctuary. Lancelot, seeing a direct advance, let out a sound that transcended mere honking. It was a sound of pure, avian fury. He launched himself out of the water, surprisingly agile on the deck, and sprinted toward Maya. Maya wasn't expecting an attack on dry land. She stumbled back, caught off guard by the duck's speed. As she scrambled to maintain her balance, her foot caught on the corner of the small, decorative stone bench Eleanor kept by the pool. She went down hard. Not into the pool, which would have been dramatic but survivable, but onto the edge of the concrete deck. Her head hit the side of the stone bench with a sickening thud. Lancelot, having successfully defended the territory, stopped short, surveying the damage with a look of supreme, duck-like satisfaction. Guinevere quacked a nervous confirmation. Eleanor gasped, running forward. Maya was lying still, her sun hat askew, a thin trickle of crimson appearing on the grey concrete near her temple. Beat of irony, Eleanor had wanted Maya to respect the boundaries. She had wished for the intrusion to stop. Now, looking at her motionless neighbor and the smug, triumphant duck, she realized the consequences of enforcing those boundaries were exponentially more terrifying than the initial minor annoyance. The beach ball, now completely deflated, floated like a piece of bright, meaningless trash in the water, a silent testament to the devastating collateral damage of their small, petty war. The air around Eleanor's pool deck thickened with the metallic scent of blood and the suffocating realization of a nightmare. Eleanor, momentarily frozen by the shock, was snapped back to reality by the sound of the fence gate swinging open and Finn's terrified shout. Eleanor immediately shifted into self-preservation mode. She was a woman of order, and this was the antithesis of order. She needed control, and she needed it now. Finn, stay back. Go inside your house and call the paramedics. Tell them your mother fell, she barked, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor running through her hands. Finn, seeing the blood, was too paralyzed to move. Eleanor ignored him for the moment. Her priority was Maya. Kneeling by Maya's side, Eleanor carefully checked for a pulse. It was weak but steady. The wound was on her temple, a relatively small gash, but the amount of blood pooling on the concrete was alarming. Maya was unconscious. Lancelot, the unwitting instrument of this disaster, had waddled back to the pool and was now placidly grooming his feathers, apparently having completed his duties. This was the critical moment. The pivot point where a tragic accident could become a criminal liability. Eleanor stood up, surveying the scene with frantic, calculating eyes. The deflated ball, the blood, the terrified child, and the ducks. She needed to craft a narrative, one that eliminated the duck factor. She turned to Finn, who was still weeping silently by the fence. Finn, listen to me. This is important. Your mother came over to talk to me, and she tripped. She tripped over the corner of the bench. Do you understand? She tripped. The ducks were nowhere near her. Say it. Finn, traumatized, looked from his unconscious mother to the imposing, demanding Eleanor, then back to the pool where Lancelot reigned. He shook his head, whimpering. No, the duck, he chased her. Eleanor grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in. No, Finn. The duck was in the pool. Your mother tripped. If you tell them anything else, they will take the ducks away forever. Do you want them to take the ducks away? The threat, illogical as it was, hit Finn where he was most vulnerable. In the middle of his terror and distress, the idea of the white, beautiful birds, even the aggressive ones, being taken away, was a horrifying prospect. He was a child who desperately craved order and normalcy, and Eleanor, in her moment of desperation, had preyed on that. She tripped, Finn whispered, his eyes darting fearfully to the water. Good boy, Eleanor said, releasing his arm. Now, go inside and call 911. Tell them everything exactly as I said. The paramedics arrived 15 minutes later, followed quickly by a patrol car, standard procedure for a head injury. Eleanor, calm and composed, related her prepared story to the first officer, a young man named Officer Kelly. She was quite upset about a ball that had landed in my pool, officer, Eleanor explained, gesturing to the deflated object that was now wrapped in a towel and placed neatly on the bench. She marched onto the deck, obviously distracted, and her foot caught on the corner of this bench. She fell backward, hitting her head on the stone. It was a dreadful, awful accident. And the ducks? Officer Kelly asked, scribbling in his notebook. He gave Lancelot a nervous glance. They were in the pool, swimming, Eleanor replied smoothly, forcing a look of weary sadness onto her face. They never left the water. They are quite docile, really, when they aren't provoked. The narrative was clean, simple, and believable enough. It focused on Maya's distraction and the unfortunate placement of the bench. But the police weren't Eleanor's only problem. They soon interviewed Finn, who, though clearly shaken, mechanically repeated Eleanor's fabricated account. He had internalized the threat, lie, or the ducks suffer. Maya was transported to the local hospital with a severe concussion and a fractured temple bone. The initial diagnosis was grim, a long recovery period and the possibility of lasting neurological damage. The neighborhood, fueled by the sirens and the sight of the ambulance, began to buzz with speculation. Eleanor, the quiet, eccentric woman with the prize-winning pool, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight of local gossip. She maintained her composure, her story locked down, a picture of the concerned, if slightly stiff, neighbor. However, the truth had a persistent habit of leaking through the cracks. 2 days after the incident, Eleanor was tending her roses when she saw a woman she vaguely recognized, a known busybody named Mrs. Davies, talking animatedly to another neighbor by the fence. She says she tripped, Mrs. Davies was saying in a stage whisper, but little Lily, the 4-year-old, told her babysitter that the big white bird was mad at mommy and that mommy fell down because the bird was chasing her. The poor little thing is confused, of course, but you know how these things go. Eleanor felt a cold wave wash over her. Lily. The unscripted witness. She was too young to understand the gravity of the lie, too young to fear the consequences, and thus, too young to be successfully coached. Eleanor realized her web of lies, carefully woven to protect her lifestyle and her birds, was already beginning to unravel, held together by the terrified silence of an 8-year-old boy and the fragile memory of a 4-year-old girl. Beat of karma. As Eleanor watched the neighbors whispering and glancing at her house, she felt Lancelot nuzzle his head against her ankle, a gesture he usually reserved for demanding a treat. She looked down at his unblinking black eyes, no longer seeing a beloved pet, but a liability, an accomplice, and a ticking time bomb. The silence of the neighborhood had been replaced by the sound of gossip, and the price of protecting her ducks, of protecting the lie, was the permanent loss of her peace and her reputation. Maya's recovery was painfully slow. After a week in the hospital, she was released, but the head injury had left her with crippling migraines, chronic dizziness, and a short-term memory deficit that was terrifying for a single mother. She was forced to take a leave of absence from her demanding job as a software engineer, plunging the family into immediate financial distress. Her house, once a beacon of sunny activity, was now shrouded in a quiet anxiety. The children were being cared for by a rotation of neighbors and sitters, and the yard, which Maya could no longer tend due to her equilibrium issues, was beginning to show signs of neglect. Eleanor, despite her carefully constructed facade, was suffocating under the pressure. The police had closed the case, Officer Kelly had deemed it an unfortunate accident, but the rumors continued to swirl, and the quiet hostility from her neighbors was palpable. No one would meet her eye at the grocery store. The real threat, however, came not from gossip, but from the legal system. 3 weeks after the accident, a man in a cheap suit appeared at Eleanor's door. He handed her a thin, official-looking document. It was a civil subpoena. Maya Chen vs. Eleanor Vance. The claim was for negligence, medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering. The amount cited was staggering, $850,000. Eleanor felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Maya hadn't accepted the accident narrative, she was suing. Eleanor immediately contacted her attorney, a meticulous, silver-haired man named Arthur Kinsley. Arthur's assessment was blunt. It all comes down to the facts, Eleanor. Did your ducks initiate the contact that caused her fall? If we can prove they were not involved, the case is a simple negligence claim, and her recovery will be limited to what the insurance covers. They were in the pool, Eleanor repeated the mantra, the lie now firmly welded to her memory. They never left the water. Good. We must be consistent. They will depose you, Eleanor. They will depose the children. And most importantly, they will depose Maya. Arthur tapped his pen against the file. I need to know, does she remember what happened? I don't know, Eleanor admitted. She had a terrible concussion. Find out. Her memory is our greatest weakness or our strongest asset, Arthur said. If she remembers the attack, the liability skyrockets. Eleanor spent the next few days monitoring Maya's situation. The children were often outside, listlessly playing, guarded by a harried-looking teenage sitter. Eleanor watched Finn, constantly. The boy was nervous, twitchy. He avoided the fence line entirely, but occasionally, his eyes would flick toward Lancelot, who was basking on the pool deck, radiating an aura of untouchable arrogance. The deposition date arrived quickly. Eleanor, impeccably dressed and coached by Arthur, delivered her testimony flawlessly: the ball, the warning, the distraction, the trip, the fall. She was the model of a responsible, if protective, pet owner. Then came the children's depositions. Lily went first. Her testimony, transcribed verbatim, was predictably vague and contradictory, the ramblings of a 4-year-old. She talked about the mad white bird, but also about her mother falling on the ouchie bench. It was easily dismissed by Arthur as childhood fantasy compounded by trauma. But Finn's deposition was a different story. He was pale and fidgety. He started strong, reciting the script Eleanor had given him. My mom, she was angry about the ball, she tripped on the bench, the duck was in the pool. However, Maya's lawyer, a relentless and sharp woman named Ms. Ramirez, was prepared. She didn't press him on the moment of the fall, she pressed him on the motive. Finn, Ms. Ramirez asked gently, did the duck hurt you the first time you went swimming? Finn's eyes darted toward his mother, who was sitting slumped in her chair, holding an ice pack to her head. I just splashed a lot. And the duck, Ms. Ramirez continued, her voice soft but insistent, did he hit you? The silence in the conference room stretched, heavy and suffocating. Eleanor, observing via video link from Arthur's office, held her breath. Finn looked at the table, his small shoulders hunched. The memory of the pain, the terror, the subsequent coercion, it was all too much. The duck, the big duck, he pushed me, Finn whispered, barely audible. He pushed me hard in the chest. Ms. Ramirez leaned forward. And when the ball went over the fence, did your mother know how aggressive that duck was? Yes, Finn mumbled, tears welling in his eyes. And when your mother went to get the ball, did the duck come out of the water? Finn squeezed his eyes shut. He was crying freely now, his internal conflict tearing him apart. He knew Eleanor's threat, but the lie tasted like ash in his mouth, especially with his mother sitting right there, suffering because of it. He ran, Finn choked out. He ran at her. He made a scary noise, and she fell because she was running away from him. It wasn't a trip. He chased her. The confession was devastating. Eleanor watched the proceedings on the screen, her composure finally shattering. The meticulous lie, the careful construction of her defense, had been completely undone by the conscience of a child. Beat of heartbreak, the camera focused on Maya. She lifted her head, and for the first time in weeks, her eyes seemed to clear. The dullness was gone, replaced by a sudden, chilling clarity. Hearing her son's anguished confession, the veil of the concussion seemed to lift, and the forgotten truth of the attack flooded her mind. She looked directly at the video link where she knew Eleanor was watching. A single, triumphant, but deeply wounded tear rolled down her cheek. Eleanor had lost. The price of forcing a child's silence was the full force of the law, armed with the undeniable truth. The truth, once spoken, could not be recalled. Finn's deposition had not only provided the necessary evidence to establish Eleanor's liability but had also jogged Maya's memory, confirming the sequence of events. The duck, Lancelot, had indeed been the proximate cause of her fall and injury. Arthur Kinsley wasted no time. Eleanor, we have lost the factual defense. The boy's testimony is credible, and it establishes a pattern of known aggression. Given the extent of her injuries and the significant potential for a massive jury award against us, we have only one option: settlement. The negotiation was swift and brutal. Maya's lawyer, Ms. Ramirez, used the severity of Maya's long-term pain and her lost career income as leverage. They demanded a non-negotiable $750,000. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. $750,000. It was nearly half her net worth, not including her house. Her insurance would cover a portion, but the deductible and the non-covered damages would still leave her financially crippled, her retirement savings severely depleted. And the ducks, Arthur added, looking uncomfortable. They are demanding a clause in the settlement agreement, the permanent removal of the ducks from the property. They are to be surrendered to animal control immediately upon signing the papers. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. The entire lie, the coercion of Finn, the ruin of her reputation, it had all been to protect Lancelot and Guinevere. And now, she had to pay an astronomical sum and lose the very creatures she had fought so fiercely to keep. The irony was a physical ache. After a single, agonizing night of reflection, Eleanor capitulated. She authorized Arthur to finalize the settlement. She had lost the war. The day the papers were signed was gray and oppressively silent. Arthur had handled the logistics. A professional team from animal control arrived discreetly in an unmarked van. Eleanor watched from her patio as two kind but firm young women, wearing thick gloves, netted Lancelot and Guinevere. Lancelot did not go quietly. He put up a spirited, violent fight, honking his fury at the injustice of the situation. It was a familiar, guttural sound, one that had brought Eleanor comfort for years, and now, only immense grief and regret. Guinevere, silent and trembling, followed her mate into the wire cage. As the van pulled away, Eleanor stood alone by the pool, which suddenly looked vast, empty, and meaningless. Her paradise was gone, replaced by a financial ruin and a profound loneliness. She had won her solitude, but at the cost of everything else. The next few weeks were a blur of bank transfers and legal paperwork. Eleanor had been humbled, defeated, and financially decimated. She stopped using the pool, refusing to even look at the water that had once been the center of her life. Maya, meanwhile, received her settlement. The money provided immediate relief, allowing her to pay off medical debts and hire the necessary help for her extended recovery. It bought her peace of mind, though not a complete cure. The migraines and memory issues persisted, a constant reminder of the day her neighbor's pet attacked her. Eleanor avoided the Chen house. She didn't want to see Maya, and she certainly didn't want to face Finn, whose courage had cost her everything. One afternoon, months later, Eleanor was listlessly packing up the ducks' old feed bowls, finally accepting the permanence of their absence. She was by the side yard, near the fence line, when she overheard a conversation from the Chen's yard. It was Finn and a friend. "Did you ever go swimming in Mrs. Vance's pool?" the friend asked. "Nah," Finn's voice replied, sounding older and more confident now. "It's way too boring. Besides, my mom got us a membership to the new community pool. It's awesome, it has a slide." "Yeah, but your mom got hurt bad at Mrs. Vance's house, right? The duck attacked her." Finn chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound that was utterly foreign to the anxious boy Eleanor remembered. "Yeah, kind of. But it wasn't just a duck. It was Lancelot. He was a total monster, man. Like a mini guard dog. The one time he hit me, I swear, I thought my chest was broken." "Wow, that's crazy." "The craziest part," Finn said, his voice dropping conspiratorially, "is that after my mom got hurt, the old lady told me if I didn't say my mom tripped, the cops would take the ducks away and put them down. I had to lie to save them." Eleanor froze, the feed scoop falling from her hand with a metallic clank. "But they got taken away anyway, right?" the friend asked. "Yeah," Finn replied. "But Mom's lawyer told my mom that the old lady only had to pay us all that money because I finally told the truth about Lancelot chasing her. So I got to save the ducks from being put down, and then I got to get my mom the money to make her better. It was the best way it could have worked out." He paused. "My mom says I was really brave." Eleanor stared at the fence, her mouth dry. She had threatened him, coerced him, and convinced him that his silence was the price of the duck's safety. He had taken the burden of that lie, endured the guilt, and then, finding his courage, had reversed the narrative, not only helping his mother but also believing, in his 8-year-old logic, that by telling the whole truth, the confession that the duck chased his mother, he had secured the justice that led to their removal, saving them from a worse fate she had invented. The truth, to Finn, was the justice the ducks and his mother deserved. Eleanor, who had been so obsessed with control and the protection of her property, had been outmaneuvered by a child's deep-seated need to protect his mother, even if it meant sacrificing the pets he had been briefly forced to protect. She realized, with a soul-crushing certainty, that she had created her own demise. She had taught Finn the power of the truth by forcing him to believe in the necessity of a lie. Final shocking twist, Eleanor walked slowly toward the empty, shimmering pool. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the old spare key to the pool shed, the shed where she kept the cleaning chemicals and the winterizing equipment. Lancelot and Guinevere were gone. Her money was gone. Her peace was gone. But as she stared into the deep, reflective blue water, she realized there was one thing left to take. She needed to end the chapter, to bury the history, and to finally silence the one thing that still demanded her attention. Her eyes settled on the drain at the bottom of the pool. She had paid for the consequences, but the source of the conflict, the tempting, beautiful, territorial blue water, remained. Eleanor stepped back, looked at the empty back door of her house, and then started walking deliberately toward the pool shed, the rusty key heavy in her palm. The pool, without the ducks, without the battles, was a hollow memory of her former life. She was going to fill the beautiful, empty hole in her backyard. Permanently.